Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Nice
How
to
are you?
see you.
It's so good to see you.
How's the family doing?
The family's doing amazing. Kingston turned 3 over the weekend.
Awesome.
It's so magical.
That's cool. Do you have one or two?
Just one, my one and
Okay.
only.
I love it. I love it. That's the best. I mean, I have two, and it's basically like two single ones because I get to spoil each of them. But I think once you get to three, then it's like you hear like the cliche of you're outnumbered. It's like
It's a clan.
they're the next level. They're next level. Yeah.
How are you? Happy holidays.
Same to you. Yeah, I'm doing well. Staying busy. The clinic's been busy, podcasts and team like meetings and stuff. So it's been a good time. How about you?
Same, same. It's so crazy. Thank you so much for coming back. In June when we recorded,
Yeah.
I had a big concussion that I hadn't really acknowledged. Maybe I told you a little bit about it.
Yeah.
And then
Was it lifting weights, right?
it was, but I had my Haji got flared because I overdid it in the gym.
Okay.
I hired a Gabrielle Lyons trainer. Okay.
That's right. You did tell me that.
And I thought that that was the thing. And I had had a concussion a week and a half before I interviewed you. Hence why I forgot just a lot of things. I remember
Yeah.
coming into the recording, like, get it together. And I thought it was my Haji's, but it was the
Hmm.
combo. And then I had another massive concussion a week later,
Oh my God.
and went into a very bad brain
Oh,
injury spiral. So I'm
no.
almost on the other side of everything, but there was a moment there I couldn't drive. I couldn't shower. I couldn't take care of my son. Alex took over everything. And it was a very scary time, but to be on the other side in December, is I'm so grateful.
Wow. I did not know that happened to you. I'm so sorry.
But I was just thinking about this. I was in the almost kind of at the beginning of what was happening to me, when I was interviewing you, and just like trying to like be who I normally was, but my
Yeah.
brain just wasn't doing what I wanted it to
Yeah.
do. And so
Did you get
I,
to take a break from like work and stuff to
yeah,
rest and heal?
I absolutely had to. I couldn't even look at a screen. That's how
Hmm.
bad it was. I was very dizzy, sensory overload, overstimulated light. I had a migraine for 15 days in a row. So like things
Wow.
just spiraled out of control, like very
Oh
quickly.
my gosh.
So
What helped you? I mean, what?
I was put on a major concussion protocol. First, I had to go do a CT. I had went to the ER, the whole nine, just to make sure
Hmm.
like something else wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Um, I did hyperbaric oxygen. I did
Good.
vision therapy. I did high dose omegas, progesterone. I was on an autoimmune anti-inflammatory protocol, diet protocol. I mean, honestly, Will, everything I could do without overwhelming me.
Hmm. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I was in bed for 7 days straight,
Mm.
dark room. I barely saw my son, and because I just couldn't,
Hmm.
everything was too much. That was after I got out of the hospital. But yeah, so it just, so there was then that, and then I would say a full month of just, I was in brain treatments every day, almost for 30 days.
Wow.
So, but I went
How?
full tilt. I was like, I am coming out of this because I
Yes,
knew
you're healing.
I had a 90-day window because I basically severe post concussion syndrome. So I knew what my window was small in order to
Hmm.
ensure I didn't have chronic standing issues. So
Hmm.
I just the second I knew what was happening, I immediately just called in as many resources as I could.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How did you do hyperbaric every day? Like how for
I did
30
it
days?
every day. Yep. That was one of the treatments and I was in there for an hour every
Yeah.
day.
It's timely. But it's super effective though, right? I mean, it's
Yeah, I was
crazy.
doing zone two training. I mean, anything and everything everything I could implement.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, it was a journey for
I bet.
sure. So
I bet. I'm glad you're feeling better though.
me too. And I'm so glad we get to do this interview again where
Oh my gosh.
I can think.
Yeah, that's right. I have this Yeti mic, but it's not picking up. I don't know why my
You
I don't know what.
sound good,
Oh, if I
but
sound good, then I'm gonna let it be then.
is
Because
that cool?
I do have this Yeti.
It's I
It's
can
not even set up, so I'm gonna
Is
take
it
it
a new
down.
mic?
No, it's not. I just for some reason. This Mac does not read its existence. I don't know
Come on,
why.
Mac. Come
I
on.
know. Well, if I sound good, I'm just gonna undo this and just let it be.
And how was your pilgrimage? How was your vacation,
Oh
pilgrimage,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
retreat?
yeah. It was great. We went to Scotland, Ireland. It was fun. It was fun.
Yay. I'm so
Really fun.
glad.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I wanted to. Okay, we'll get right into it. And what
Yeah.
I'm going to do is first question I'm going to ask you is kind of what was the big inspiration around this book, and
Yeah.
how did it come to be? I feel like that's what I probably asked you out the gate. This is obviously book number 4, and so just kind of the evolution of what brought you here, will to why this book is so important to you, and then we'll just get into it.
Go. Let's
How's
go
that
for it.
sound?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
Welcome to the Energized podcast, Dr. Will Cole. I know this isn't your first rodeo here. I'm so excited to have you back. And we are talking about your newest book that I knew came out earlier this year called Gut Feelings. And I think we all know that every single one of us, there's definitely a gut everything connection, and that a lot of us are dealing with some gut stuff. I don't think we always put the pieces together as to, could this be related to how I'm feeling, how I'm operating in the world, other symptoms that just may not be associated. And what I want to first ask you coming out the gate is, this is your 4th book, and I love this book. I feel like it connects the dots for so many things that many of us are dealing with in our relationships, in our personal lives, how we
Mhm.
respond to the world. And kind of what was your inspiring moment? What was the impetus for this book? Why was it important to you?
It's First of all, thank you for having me back.
Yes.
As my main job running the telehealth clinic, so much of that job looking at labs and explaining labs to people in a way that they understand, empowering them with the information, guiding them to improve that information. So much of my job is language, communication, education, empowerment. So that's where all the books have been born out of, are really so many conversation, like rich, edifying, insightful conversations that I've had with our telehealth patients. And it's like, okay, you hear enough questions and you have enough conversations, and wow, this is a book. This is a bigger, people have these questions, similar questions. Has to be formulated in a different way beyond just talking one-on-one online with telehealth patients. So Gut Feelings is born out of those conversations with patients, and it's talking about the bidirectional relationship between mental health and physical health. And in the West, we'll oftentimes separate the two. Like, we have physical health, right? If someone's sick, they go to their doctor. Someone's, whatever, has some sort of malady, they go to the doctor. But mental health is somehow separated in a way. This abstract, quote unquote, chemical imbalance that's never measured, it's never looked at on labs, but it's just sort of given antidepressants to you, like given, take this medication, see you later. Like, that's who you are. And like that you're somehow, it's entirely genetic and there's nothing you can do. So it's a deeper spiritual book that's
It
talking
is.
about this crosstalk between gut and feelings, the physical gut, and then the mental, emotional, spiritual, the feelings, and the interplay, the crosstalk between the two, and how underlying physiological things like gut health, like inflammation, like nutrient deficiencies, like environmental toxins, like biotoxins, like mold, will
Mm-hmm.
impact how our nervous system works, will dysregulate our nervous system, impacting the neuroendocrine axis and our nervous system and our hormones, impacting our mood. But then conversely, the feeling stuff, how things like chronic stress and trauma impact our physiology, raising inflammation, triggering autoimmune problems. So that's what the book's about. It's a deeper book. It's a spiritual book, but yet it's still practical and through the lens of functional medicine, because that's where I'm coming from. But it's what I've seen work for people to regulate a dysregulated nervous system, to calm inflammation levels by healing both the gut and the feelings.
I thank you so much for really kind of defining what you were hoping to achieve and what you've seen play out in your individual patients that you take care of every single day. And that, we can't separate the two with this. We're not operating in a silo. Like, our hormones or our gut or our neurological system, like these are not operating separately and they should not be treated as such. And with as many people dealing with mental health issues, for me, the demographic that I work with is women in their 40s and 50s, pretty much in the perimenopause, heading into menopause spectrum, where we see a major uptick in mental health issues. And the first thing that we're recommending to women is either antidepressants or talk therapy. And often we're never looking at their hormones, we're not looking at their microbiome, we're not connecting the dots that maybe those are the drivers for what is going on. And I myself, I've been sharing this on the show, but I've been dealing with some perimenopausal rage and I've been working it out. And so looking at GI maps, connecting the dots in trauma, looking at inflammatory markers, just trying to connect, and also looking at hormones, like knowing that I'm no stone is being left unturned right now, because what does not mix well is a perimenopausal rageful woman and a wonderful toddler boy. Like those two do not mesh. And so my son has got none of the brunt of any of that, but I'm really interested in understanding why millions of women like myself start to experience mood changes like this at this age. And I
Yeah.
felt like your book had been so helpful to me personally because it allowed me to really dive deeper into what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. It's funny that, not funny, but you know what I'm saying. I think I hear that a lot when someone's going through, that's feeling irritable, wired and tired, anxious, exhausted, they're like short-tempered, short-fused, burnt out, raging. They will tell me on the other side of that healing that it helps obviously them, but it also helps their relationships, right?
Oh,
Because
for
when
sure.
it's their health of themselves will also in turn help the health of their relationships. And so many people will verbalize it to me like, oh, I thought it was just me. Because maybe it wasn't like they weren't doing all the things you're doing. It wasn't just perimenopausal rage. It was going on for years of their life.
Right.
And they just thought, this is who I am. I'm a irritable person, or it becomes like their personality versus realizing, no, it's just because something's your everyday doesn't mean you should settle for it. And oftentimes these things that we just identify with and make part of our identity, it's really the body's check engine light to tell you there's something here. And most people don't do what we do, right? And to know that like this, you knew your body intuitively to know, hey, this
Let's
isn't
like
me.
dig in.
Let's do something about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a warning sign. I was like, initially, it's interesting. I've shared this on the show. Initially, I thought it was maybe the kind of residual of my concussions because I know
Mm,
people, you get hit in the head hard enough,
yeah.
your mood can shift. And so,
100%.
but I started, I track my cycle, all the things I'm, watching. I was like, no, this is 2 months in a row, clockwork, and so I
Mm-hmm.
dug even deeper. And I just love that this book opens the door for the possibility of like you said, maybe this isn't maybe it's not how I'm supposed to be feeling. Maybe something has shifted inside of me. And I know that so many women, and particularly as we get older, we start to feel, like you said, more irritable, more burned out, more higher levels of deregulated cortisol. And we know so much of that even shifts our microbiome. And so
Mm-hmm.
I'd love for you to speak a little bit into a deregulated stress response system and how that has a profound impact, and even touch upon trauma as well, because I don't think a lot of people realize how much those really big pieces, what I call kind of insidious behind the scenes root
Mm-hmm.
causes, can drive a lot of the physical ailments that we're dealing with. Like you connected the dot between trauma and autoimmunity, which
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely feel is a big part of my journey as well, but I think a lot of people never see that connection.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. And I think to varying degrees, we have to look at what's going on here. It's like when it's that we talk flippantly sometimes about a dysregulated nervous system. What are we talking about? It's
Mm-hmm.
the nervous system's meant to go and vacillate depending on the circumstance between a more balanced, grounded, safe state to a hypervigilant state. Like they're all there, but you're supposed to be ebb and flow. Most people are stuck in some level, at least, of some dysregulated state, meaning their sympathetic nervous system, that one aspect of their autonomic nervous system, that that the fight or flight or freeze response is overactive, is overtoned, if you will. And something that's underactive or weak is the parasympathetic, that resting, digesting, hormone balanced state. Both are important. One's not bad and one's not good, but you don't want an overactive and underactive. It's homeostasis. It's the Goldilocks principle, right, in the body. You don't. Same with inflammation. You don't want too much inflammation. You don't want a deficiency of inflammation. Or microbiome. You don't want an excess of microbes, or bacterial overgrowth. You don't want a deficiency. Same with hormones. You don't want hormone dominance. You don't want a deficiency. And this is, we like to demonize certain things and make sympathetic bad or cortisol bad. And no, it's just about in balance, in context. When do we need it? How much do we need? An appropriate response. So that's what most people are found as an inappropriate response to the circumstance because of these chronic stressors. And by stressors, I mean both physiological stressors and psychological stressors. The body's going to see those as the same and have similar results or similar responses. So the physiological stressors are some of the things I mentioned earlier, like underlying gut problems, environmental toxins, biotoxins, nutrient deficiencies, bacterial viral issues,
metals, maybe.
Stealth infections. So these things will create a physiological response which will look like some sort of neuroimmunoendocrine axis response, the intersection between the nervous system, sympathetic, parasympathetic, the immune system, i.e. inflammation, it's a product of the immune system, and our endocrine system, our hormonal system, and the interplay communication line between the two. But you could have psychological responses like chronic stress and trauma, and looking at both the physiological and the psychological component to that. So cortisol, that last part, that neuroimmunoendocrine, the endocrine part of that communication line, that cascade of communication, in part, you're going to see higher cortisols or dysregulated cortisol that's higher when it should be low, or low when it should be high, or it's always high or always low. Some sort of imbalance, some sort of breaking of that Goldilocks principle, or a shattering of homeostasis. Typically, with our patient base, when you're dealing with chronic fatigue syndrome, more autoimmune problems, this isn't always the case, but many people in that sort of umbrella of issues have low cortisol, actually, and adrenaline's overcompensating.
Because it's basically, for a long time, that has been overactivated, and at some point it just, cortisol drops.
Exactly. You'll see a drop, and cortisol is needed for lots of good things. It's an
lots
endogenous,
of good things. Yeah.
It's an endogenous immunosuppressant. It's a natural anti-inflammatory. So people will oftentimes feel like, when I show them the labs, oh, I'm surprised by that. I thought my cortisol would be through the roof, because they feel like that, but it's not showing up in data because it is such a chronic inflammatory response, a chronic stress dysregulated response where inflammation is high, but the regulatory mechanisms, in this case, cortisol, is underactive, but adrenaline's overcompensating.
I was going to say something's overcompensating there to have them feeling that way. Yeah.
So that's what's going on. But look, you mentioned like trauma and autoimmune issues. Like I think there's something to the fact that when you look at what's happening on a physiological level, and it's molecular mimicry, the case of mistaken identity, when the immune system is mistaking the tissue, the body, and there's over 100 different autoimmune conditions, whether it's Hashimoto's or lupus or Crohn's, ulcerative colitis, MS, Sjogren's, whatever you're talking about. The immune system's tagging that tissue as with a flag for destruction, an antibody to attack it. And then researchers refer to that molecular mimicry as the immune system losing recognition of self, which is happening on a physiological level. But then I think, okay, the mental, emotional, spiritual connection of that, someone losing recognition of self, and research looking at stress and trauma and shame and how these things can trigger the autoimmune response. So in some cases, what came first is the question that I have. And I think that so many people have this sort of inward shame and unresolved trauma component that then beget the physiological response.
Oh, I absolutely agree. Mhm.
And certainly somebody that feels like crap is going to have this vicious cycle. Then they will, I see a lot of like, once the triggering happened, it then amplifies that shame because they feel like their body's turned against itself, which it has, which is a lot to heal from, not just physically, but on an emotional relationship with your body too.
Curious question for you, particularly when you're looking at patients with, burnout or chronic fatigue or autoimmune or some type of immune response. How often, when you really dig in, because I wonder if you ever thought that that was going to be kind of a part of what you did, that you were going to get a little bit deeper into the emotional aspect, that trauma was going to be a potential root cause, and that the question was going to have to be asked of like, when did this actually really start? Like, what was the real triggering event? Was it 20 years ago? Was it 40 years ago? Was it something so far down the road that the pattern became so ingrained that they have no idea anymore? And it's now just playing out in this kind of in a multitude of physical ailments. More the question is like, how often are you seeing this come to play?
It's ubiquitous to say the least. I mean, but you don't know what you're up against until you look at it and see what you're up against. And most people, if you're not asking the question, you're not going to know the answer. And when have an initial telehealth consult, and this is why I'm putting in the book in lieu of like, if you're not a telehealth patient, these are things you can ask yourself, right? But in the clinical setting, we're asking these questions, and you don't know the answer until you ask the question. And then and that could be someone like a doctor asking you that question, or it could be you asking yourself, oh wow, checking in with your life, checking in with your body. Like we block so many things out or gaslight ourselves and thinking that it's not that big of a deal. But people need to realize that trauma, that word A is just used so
So
much.
much.
Like trauma and triggered are like, they're so like bastardized at that point, for lack of better words. They're just like cheapened because these are heavy things with consequences, and it should be taken with and given the serious and gravity that it deserves. And it's trauma is not the event; it's the response to the event. And many people will think that, it's like they'll compare themselves to someone worse off than them or have gone through bigger things than them and like that big T trauma. But people have to realize it's everybody. There's so much bio individuality with this. And we have siblings. We have siblings as patients, and they could have the same childhood but respond to that childhood completely different because their own perception, perspective, and bio individuality and physiological resilience, to use that bucket analogy. Some people have a bigger capacity to handle things than other people. So it's not fair, or it's not fair to compare yourself to somebody else. And everybody's nervous system has a lot of other variables to consider when it comes to that response and what determines that response. So yeah, it's a major part, but we have to ask the question. So we have every telehealth patient fill out what's called an ACE score or ACE questionnaire. It's an adverse childhood experiences or events. I adapted a lot of ACE questions on a quiz. We put the quiz completely for free at drwilcol.com. It's the gut feelings, like shameflammation quiz, which shameflammation is my made up word to talk about this phenomenon. It's how things like shame and stress and trauma impact our physiology, i.e. inflammation. So yeah, I mean, we go into deep like stuff where you're talking about sexual trauma as a kid, physical abuse as a kid, just to mental illness in the home, like growing up, alcohol abuse growing up, drug abuse growing up, neglect, just like there's a whole generation of latchkey kids,
Latchkey kids. Yeah.
latchkey, where
Yeah.
it's just
Abandonment. It's
abandonment,
amazing.
yeah, and then it's beyond, and I think this is the limit to the ACE, obviously. So people can have low ACE scores, but then have later on in life. It wasn't childhood, it was like just a young adulthood experience of a traumatic relationship, a loss of a loved one, a car accident that was, violent. I mean, it could be any number of things. So these are the questions that we have to ask, because you have to know what you're dealing with to do something about it. And I think, and in the book, I even talk about intergenerational or transgenerational trauma too, which is a whole other level, but should be looked at as well.
Mm, I agree with you 100%. I have an A score of 6. And I feel like a lot of my stuff, even how I operated in the world, and I felt like I just operated in sympathetic for as long as I could even remember, but lended to
Yeah.
more things. And it's interesting because I for a long time I thought that way of operating was a superpower. I didn't know it was. I didn't know I had adopted these strategies when I was so
Mhm.
young. They were so celebrated. So I just
Yeah.
assumed that it was great that I was like this. Even today, your friends will say, "Oh my God, you're so on time. You follow up all the time. Your follow through is amazing." They're like, "How do you?" I'm like, "It's trauma." I'm like, "I just learned how to be. I am indispensable." Obviously,
Yeah.
I've healed a lot of it, but even generational stuff. When I brought Kingston into this world, I really wanted to clean up a lot of that, because I just didn't want to. I don't want my son to have any type of score. I don't want him to be on the scorecard at all. And so it's just really fascinating to me, like, piecemealing it together, not until I was in my 30s and thinking, I thought it was something just physiological, and how many people feel that way. I'm so grateful that you have a quiz, and we'll have that link in the show notes so that these are questions that we can answer, and that we can get insight around so that we can then figure out what's going on. If there's something even deeper there that we need to tap into versus taking some probiotics or filling in these nutrient gaps, like that, there's probably more to it than just that,
Oh
which I
yeah.
think is so important.
Yeah, 100%. And you talk about probiotics and gut health. Because we're talking about crosstalk, how does the gut impact the feelings and how does the feelings impact our gut? I see many people that have gut problems, inflammation problems, food sensitivities, things like histamine issues, oxalate issues, leptin sensitivities, these things that we look so much at just the food.
Right.
But what I've seen is that when people start to strengthen their vagus nerve, like toning that weaker part, that poor vagal tone is then strengthened and metabolize some of the stored stress and trauma in the body. A lot of those food sensitivities, gut problems, inflammation issues, autoimmune problems calm and go away. So we have to look at both sides of that coin. It has to be a both and not either or approach dealing with whether it's nervous system dysregulation, hormone problems, or autoimmune problems. Dealing with those both sides will get you where you need to be. So it's like I see people that have dealt with one or the other, and they're better off than they would be if they hadn't done those things. But a both and approach will fill in the gaps. And maybe you have done a little bit of both, but you're not really given either one like the full attention. So this book, in many ways, a beginner could read it, but it's really, in my mind, for the person that is the wellness aficionado that's like, okay, what's missing here? And what are the things that I'm like overlooking, but I need to pay attention to?
I agree. I mean, I think it's that broader, like once you've done some of the basics, the foundations, and yet you're still working it out, then it's time to go a little bit deeper. Even myself, I find myself still going through it as I continue to navigate parenthood, as I navigate through my son's life. I'm noticing things that are coming up for me that I thought I was done healing. I
Yeah.
think the lesson I've learned about this, especially around trauma, is that it's an all the time thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I find myself so intentional around. It's so fascinating how my patterns, and I'm sure you see this with so many of your patients, they just want to come back up like on automatic. And I have to be so aware that they're trying to come back in because they were patterns that ruled me for decades, you
Mhm.
know, and quite and without objection. I was like, do you're like,
Yeah. Well, that's not interesting. Like you said something like these qualities that the world deifies and glorifies is like this hyper vigilant hustle culture, right? Oh, someone that's really good at hustle culture will be it'll be a badge of honor.
yeah, oh yeah.
Burnout is a badge of honor, and but it's not that you can't hone in great qualities within that. I'm not saying that, like being productive and being, a go-getter, that's all good stuff, but it has to be born out of like a regulated state and like a sustainable state, not an unsustainable state. And that makes it harder to heal, right? Because you kind of identify with it. It's what makes you great, or it makes you you. And it can be hard for people to say, well, I need to, this isn't sustainable. I don't feel good doing this. It's impacting my health. But you won't, I mean, you know this, but for people to know this, they won't lose who they are. It'll just be more sustainable and more balanced and more tempered.
Yeah, I agree. And well, and that's been, to me, that's been the ultimate lesson is if these are ingrained, patterned, let's call them superpowers, let's just call them. Some
Mhm.
people think that they are. Some people would love to have them.
Mhm.
But like, how do you operate like that in a regulated state? Because I find that I can easily tip the scale to a deregulated state, that I'm always intentionally working on how do I still be who I am? How are these are I'm so these are blessings in a way. Like I wouldn't be who I was without those experiences.
Mhm.
But I also know that those patterns have gotten me in a lot of trouble health wise. So
Mhm.
how do I get to how do I get to eat my gluten-free, dairy-free, healthy cake, and and still and eat it too. So like, how do I get to have both? And
Yeah.
that's been the beautiful balance for me, is how do
Mhm.
I get to have both, and how do I recognize when I'm going out of the rails?
Yeah. I mean, it's true. I mean, just because someone can do all the things doesn't mean they should do all the things. It's
Right,
like
exactly.
it's like it's if your body is going to, like posted something recently. It's like if you don't find a time to rest, your body's going to pick one for you. And it's like we have to realize that we have to we love in our culture today talk about healthy boundaries, healthy boundaries, healthy boundaries. Our healthy boundaries begins with ourselves. Like, how do we say no for ourselves? How do we tell ourselves no? And that could be foods that don't love us back. That can be saying no to our schedule and having healthy boundaries there. Our relationship with technology, right? FOMO inducing content, whatever it is. And this isn't like a moral indictment if someone should shaming themselves if they're not where they want to be, but it's just raising awareness to where do you want to be, and decide that for yourself.
I agree. Yeah. Like in terms of, yeah, I think it's a lot of, for me, it's awareness and intentionality of just
Mhm.
like what feels good, like what's going to nourish my body, what's going to take care of my body, what's going to have me feeling energized tomorrow, but like
Mhm.
a good energized, not a, high level cortisol.
Yeah. Or it's not a good quality. Like people can push through the day, but it's not a good quality day. And it was like a means to an end. Like they push through just to get through the day. Versus, like you said, being present, like really being anchored, but still abundant in energy, but not this sort of frenetic toiling that I think a lot of times people feel it. And we're good at hiding it. I think many of us have a certain type of personality are good at like looking, oh, look, they're on, they've got it all together, they're high performing, but it's not necessarily good quality. And we have to check ourselves. I'm the same way. Like you have to, just because I can do it and push myself, and doesn't mean I should be doing it.
Well, I would love actually to dive a little bit into your own world. Well, I mean, you've got a lot of things going on. You have a very full life. You've got beautiful children. You got a beautiful family. You've got an incredible clinic. You've got a lot going on in general. And I would say that in all the interactions I've ever had with you, very grounded. You come from amazing. You just have amazing energy, and you seem so vibrant and healthy. It's always been the case that I've seen you. What has worked for you? Or are there ways in which intentionally you kind of do your day? What are things that have been the kind of the needle movers for you that have been mainstays?
Mm. Yeah, so it's interesting, like the timeline of everything. I think maybe we talked about this briefly earlier this year, but I mean offline, but the book came out in earlier 2023, right?
Mhm.
And weeks before, my dad died suddenly in a car accident, 63 years old. And the last time I saw him, we were talking about this book release, and he was so excited about it. And he was picking up my mom from the airport and died. No one saw what happened. It was just went off into the woods and crashed into a tree and died of a blunt force trauma. So that was massively like jolting to my family and myself, and then processing all of that, running the telehealth clinic, then going into book release mode, which is like a job on top of a job.
It's a
Uh,
mega job. It's a
yeah,
whole thing.
it's a whole thing. Plus the podcast, like all stuff that I love, but then having to like, I can't like pause a book release. It's just kind
Yeah.
of,
I mean,
it's,
you're the person. You're
yeah,
the
it's
brand.
what goes, it's what it goes on. And
You can't
Penguin,
send someone else out.
no, and Penguin Random House is depending on me
Yeah.
and like
They're
everything. I
like, we're
can't,
gonna need you to sell this book.
and I wanted to. I've been working on it for
Absolutely.
years, but it was like, oh my God. So it was in a way, talk about just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Like the distraction of doing what I love was good in a way for a moment, but it was distraction. And it was, I definitely look back as the years rolled on, it's another year is here. Like it, the stress of all of that did took a toll on my health. And I wrote a book about this stuff. So I honestly canceled 90% of like traveling in the year because I knew I still had to do commitments. It was remotely, whatever. I did some TV stuff and had to travel. But for the most part, there was no book tour, no book events, no, like I didn't go to in studio to podcast. I was at the clinic. I still saw patients and I didn't leave. So I'm going to create as much healthy boundaries as I should. So I try to practice what I taught in the book. And I was practicing what I teach patients to do. And it wasn't perfect because I still obviously had to work, just like anybody else is grieving. Like they can't just quit their job and live in a, a monastery for 6 months. So I still had to work, but I at least created some healthy boundaries, which I'm glad that I did that. I think I was practicing what I taught. In hindsight, I probably could have done more. But I had to give myself grace and know, like, I did cut back. I probably should have cut back a little bit more, but that did take a toll, right? As it would on anybody. And now I'm like picking up the pieces of like, all right, let's let's start healing to another level, which is very privileged of me to be like, this is what I do for a living. So I can bring in protocols that I bring into patients and bring it into myself. So like, it's like, just like with you, with what happened with the concussion, it's just like, we have to start leaning into it, things that we would recommend and we do it ourselves. So I've been doing lots of stuff, a lot of meditation, a lot of breath work. To answer your question, all the food stuff's easy for me. That's
Yeah,
all like,
that's
yeah,
probably second nature anyway. You're
yeah.
just doing it.
It's just like upping the feeling stuff more, right? It's upping
Absolutely.
more the somatic work, the breath work, EMDR. I mean, lots of stuff like that. And like biohacking stuff, like we talked about hyperbaric. Hyperbaric has been a great thing for me too. Ozone therapy for my gut health. So yeah, all that stuff, which it's been a blessing. I honestly, I'm glad I went through it in a way. Like it's almost like
Mm.
my wife said to me, like, oh, this deepened your relationship to your patients. Like this deepened that walk that they had to go on. I'm like, yeah, you're right. That's what it did. So that was a beautiful silver lining, is it really created this sort of deepening for myself as a healer, if you want to call me that, or facilitator of healing.
I'm just kind of sitting with that for a second because man, my heart, I just felt my mom was 63. She's
Mm-hmm.
vibrant. She was just here for my son's birthday party,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone's like, oh, that's your mom? Like, there's no way your mother looks too young, and it just, we've been hearing that our whole lives, my
Yeah.
mom being too young to be my mother. And we're going to be with her tomorrow at Disneyland. And, it just, gosh, I just, my heart sunk for you in that
Thanks.
moment. And I knew you had a big climb, a big marketing climb for the book. And so I
Mm-hmm.
just kept sending you so much energy and so much love in that moment. And yeah, it's sometimes I'm so grateful to hear that you set some boundaries. And yeah, in hindsight, we're like, man, I probably should have set some more. And
Yeah. I
um,
canceled like so much. I should have canceled more, but it's all right. It's all right.
and that healing, that layering of healing continues,
Yeah.
as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's like that cliche, hindsight is 2020. Like I really have a lot more perspective now. Like, oh yeah, I could have done more. But that's all of us. Healing is nonlinear and we have to kind of give ourselves grace, and it's not going to be perfect. And when we can kind of we can pivot and shake things up at any point. It's not too late.
I agree. Yeah. And here we are today, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
life continues, right? And at the end of the day, I think the big message here too, Will, is that, without our health, what do we have? In terms of like our health impacts our relationships. It impacts our family, and it impacts everything. It impacts how we show up in the world. And I think that's been the thing that I've noticed the most is how I feel translates into how I respond and react and how I am as a mom,
Hmm.
and so I just really appreciate you sharing kind of the deeper work that you're continuing to do,
Hmm.
to not only be a facilitator, but to also show up for the people that matter most to you, especially
Yeah.
after this bigness in the year.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And like the great thing is for anybody listening, like a lot of the things that I practice, these are things I talk about in gut feelings, these sort of nervous system regulation, body, like mind body practices. Most of them are free or low cost. So that's the great thing is that people think that wellness is just for like someone else or it has to be super expensive and it's only the Air One smoothies
The
or whatever.
$20 Air One
Yeah,
smoothies.
yeah. Or whatever, like whatever you're if you're not in LA, I'm not in LA, but yeah, it's like Whole Foods, whatever. It's the massive, like high ticket items. It doesn't have to be. Like it could be very simple. And honestly, the free stuff, the low cost stuff, the accessible stuff is some of the best stuff, if not the best stuff. So it's just I want people to know that they really can make a great work in their health completely on a budget or for free.
No, I think that's important. And I think your book provides so many great resources for people to get to work. And like you said, somatic work, breath work, meditation, screaming into a pillow, walking outside in nature, all of this, all that's free. All of
Mhm.
that is free. And these are things
Putting
that
your phone down.
putting your phone down, you do not take it on your walk.
Yeah.
Do not have it when you're going to bed. All of these things are completely free. I would say the things that are the biggest needle movers for me in terms of my mental health, and kind of checking some of those patterns that have been pervasive for me are the free things that you just mentioned.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's like you have to, I call them in the book, I call them metaphysical meals. It's like you have to treat these things like you would a mealtime or a practice, like you would like an exercise. Like you can't just do it here and there, or you could, but like you're not going to get the most out of it. And but if you show up consistently on a consistent basis, you're going to start to strengthen the vagus nerve. So it is an exercise for your nervous system. And if you go to the gym once in a while and say the gym's not working for me, well, no, it's just your lack of consistency. And that's okay. But just know that's why you're not getting results for it. Or you're doing the wrong type of exercise for your body, right? But it's about, and that's same thing. Anyone with a dysregulated nervous system and you're feeling wired, tired, anxious, exhausted, brain fog, fatigue, digestive problems, hormonal problems, it's going to be difficult at first. Like that's the point. If you go to the gym and you've never worked out before and say, "Oh, this is really hard. It's not for me." Well, no, it's just you have weak muscles. You're not used to toning that. Someone with a poor vagal tone, that largest cranial nerve in the body that's responsible for that resting, digesting aspect of our nervous system is weak. Something that's weak, it can be uncomfortable to tone it. So I want people to know that people say, "Oh, meditation's not for me." It's not the meditation; it's your weak vagus nerve that needs toning. And it doesn't mean that it's the same for every. Like me, there's different ways to meditate, right? There's different ways. There's different ends to regulating your nervous system. So don't like throw it all out and say, "Well, this isn't for me." Find the right path that you can be consistent with.
Right. Find the thing that's going to initially, I always like, I know people want the wins. I mean, honestly, let's be honest. If people could just call you and then you just fix it. I mean, that's
Yeah.
that's the deal, right? I
Yeah, I wish someone would do that for me too.
mean, and so I always know that people are looking for that win. And I think especially when it comes to helping to regulate the nervous system and helping to again and improve your vagal tone, is finding the modality that feels good or feels good enough to continue it, and then adding in more modalities. One of the things that I struggled with in the beginning was breath work. I wouldn't have thought that about myself. I would have thought that maybe it was meditation because I was always so in the sympathetic, like, God, sit
Mhm.
down, do something. Like I was always someone who was lifting weights since I was 16. Like, let's bang, like what is the juice needs to be worth the squeeze, basically. But I really took to meditation, but it was breath work that I found a bit harder. But I was so grateful that I had been grounded in meditation that I knew I kind of anchored into that to move into that other modality. And
Yeah.
so, especially when it comes to a lot of the, like you said, healing our deregulated system, the trauma, finding a modality that works best for you, get started there. And you're right, it's all about consistency at the end of the day.
Yeah, like anything else, there's no magic cure all, but it's just consistency. And I would say it's a combination of things. So don't hang your hat on one thing. It has to be a combination. You don't have to be overwhelmed and say I have to do all the things, but you're going to typically have a few things in the gut section, in the physical section, and a few things in the feeling section. And the book takes you through the protocol in the book. And every day there's going to be a new gut tool and a feelings tool. So you're going to nourish both sides of that you over the course of time, and it's cumulative, and you'll continue to strengthen that vagus nerve over the course of time.
I love that. And the last question I have for you is really around mindset. And we kind of talked about just now a little bit about consistency and, just getting real with somebody that you're working with about like what it's going to actually take. But you have someone who's coming to you, obviously they're often pretty motivated, is what I'm guessing if they're coming
Yeah.
to you.
Yeah.
But I know that you've got a big community and you've got readers and obviously people listening right now. What has been kind of your secret sauce around supporting people with mindset if you find that they're kind of hitting a wall or they're not being consistent?
I think accountability is huge. And I think, and that can look different for different people, but it's like, I think that's one of the reasons why our telehealth patients are so successful. We have different, like an ascension model at the clinic. We recently launched a very affordable, like a telehealth group model where they have weekly calls with me, and having community of people going through something similar, as well as someone that's doing this for 13, 14 years in telehealth, myself coaching them and guiding them. I think that's massive. I mean, that's why people get more out of the gym when they have a trainer that's like knowing how to fine tune things. This is sort of a health, mind, body coach to work on these things. So community, coach are massive. If you don't have a community or coach, I think books are like a resource, a guide to at least self-teach. I think you can go a long way with that. But I think it's a lot of that mindset starts from within, and your why has to be bigger than your excuses. I think of the people that like I've heard every excuse in the book in 13 plus years.
I'm sure you have.
Seeing every socioeconomic background, every type of background you can think of. You think of I think of like the amount of single moms who are working single moms. They have kids that are on the spectrum or busy schedules, and they heal themselves, reclaim their health, and achieve every wellness goal they have. And then you have the patient that is independently wealthy, that has nannies and chefs, and thinks of all the excuses in the book about why they can't get healthy. And you see that across all socioeconomic backgrounds. You see people that are, paycheck to paycheck, people that are independently wealthy, that they all have the same excuses when they want to, because their why is not bigger than their excuses. So that's huge. I think just you have to check in with your why, which is so cliched, but it's so fundamental.
It's so true.
Fundamental. Because you are not going to let, like, people say, oh, the holidays are coming, or the vacations are coming, or the birthdays are coming, and oh, I'm so busy. If you're waiting for the right time, it's now. And if you think it's going to be some time and you have nothing to do but just sit there and focus on your wellness, good luck. It doesn't happen. So I think that's like the motivator I think that I've seen is this paradigm shift to look, and this isn't about what all I can't do or all the reasons why I can't do it. I'm going to start now, and I'm not going to, I'll be perfect. I'm going to do the best I can with what I have access to, what's within my budget, what I can do right now. I'm going to lean in. I'm going to lean in and give myself grace, but still progress. You can have both. And I think that's where it begins. That's where it begins.
I love that. Yes. And any of us, all of us can sit down for 5 minutes and tap into that why. Like write it, journal it out, think about it, take a walk with it, like figure what is the thing. For my women, I'm pretty sure I know what that why is. It's family, it's children, it's I had Kingston at 41. Do the math. If he's gonna be 20 when I'm 61. So like I want to be around forever. So that why is I want to be there. And I also want to be the mom who can do all the things. Like I am kicking all the other moms' butts. Like I'm running around, I'm jumping, you know what I'm saying? Like they're like, what's going on with that mom? Like she's the most, and so that's just checking with your why. And I think accountability is so important. You're absolutely right. There's never going to be a good time. There's always going to be something that comes up. There's always life is never going to stop. You're
No.
absolutely
And
right.
that's okay. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. That's like, how do we move through these seasons of life in a way that loves you back? And I think that's a learning process. And it doesn't mean you're going to be perfect. Like it's going to be clunky at first, and that's okay. Like be okay with the clunky. Because at a certain point, it's going to become intuitive. There'll be a rhythm, there'll be a strength, there'll be a resilience, there'll be a knowingness, there'll be a
Mm.
confidence. You're not supposed to be perfect overnight. Like it's like I said earlier, like you have to strengthen things that are weak. It doesn't happen overnight. And that could just by strengthen, I mean your awareness of what loves you back. Sometimes we don't know that for a while. But it's like that learning and pivoting and evolving does take time, but it's worth it with enough consistency. And that's why if you do have access to it, like a coach, a functional medicine doctor, a community, is huge because it takes some of the guesswork out of it. So I think it does like encourage and keeps you on the straight and narrow for people.
I agree. Well, and books like this, resources like this. I think that's one of the things that I've always leaned on since I was a very little girl is the knowledge of books that we can disseminate all the things that you've
Mm-hmm.
learned in 14 plus years of seeing patients and connecting the dots and looking at labs every single day. And then, putting that into a book that runs like $24 or $25 on Amazon, and you can go and put it in your cart today, literally today. And if I had to pair this book with another book of yours, I love the inflammation spectrum. Like I just love that book so much. And so you guys get two books. Go get
You
two
can get
books.
all four. I'm sure Amazon will bundle it for you.
Absolutely.
Ask Jeff, see if he'll do it for you.
Exactly. And so that's what I'm saying is just the resources are out there. Dr. Will's books are out there. Dr. Will Cole, anywhere else you would love for us to go and plug in to you?
Well, this next year, 2 years, I'm going to be really, I don't plan on writing another book right away. I'm going to really, I love the clinic so much. So that's always been my baby. And just to be able to focus creatively on systems and program and patient experience has been really fun. To not be working on a book plus that and just be working on this. So we have these many different ways we can be there for people. We have lower cost, more accessible, affordable ways. We have higher cost concierge options, and then everything in between. So people can go to drwillcole.com and learn about all the different ways that can be there for you. If you're interested in labs or functional medicine perspectives on different cases, the metabolicrecharge.com. Metabolicrecharge.com is if anybody's interested in metabolic health, blood sugar balance, longevity, we're starting that very soon, depending on when people are watching this. It's going on right now. I mean, you can sign up to be on a waiting list. So regardless, I'm involved with all these different types of care. It's just different paths for different people. And I'm trying to democratize functional medicine and make it as accessible to people as possible.
I love it. And I'm so excited to hear about this metabolism program that you're creating. I am very much obsessed with metabolic health, especially for my ladies. So I'm super stoked to hear
Thank you.
the reveal. So I will make sure to
Yeah.
have that link there as well, and the link to the website for everyone to go check out. And I just want to say thank you so much for making it more accessible. I think a lot of people, when they think about functional medicine, they think about the expense. And I just want to say thank you for making it more accessible to all of us. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's a passion project, so thank you so much.
Yes. All right. See you soon, Hen.
See ya.